So section 13.3 and 13.4 are factoring polynomials of the type ax squared plus bx plus c. So these polynomials have a coefficient in front of the x squared, and it's not going to be 1. And if you can factor it out, there's still going to be a number in front of the x squared. But I'm going to do these problems exactly the same way we did the others. So if you remember in the other problems, the first thing we would do is we'd underline that number, and we'd multiply them together. So 8 times 5 is going to give me 40. Okay. Now, I'm going to look for the numbers that multiply to 40, but those numbers are going to have to add up to a negative 14. If I use 4 and 10, but make them both negative, a negative times a negative is still a positive, and if I add them together, there's my minus 14. So now I'm going to go ahead and write it out, 8x squared minus 4x minus 10x plus 5. So I'm going to go ahead and box these first two, and I'm going to say, okay, what can I factor out of 8x squared and 4x? Well, 4x is common to both. So 4 goes into 8 2 times. There's still going to be an x left over. Minus 4 goes into 4 once. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and circle these two. Again, because that piece is negative, I'm going to take a negative out. Between 10 and 5, I can factor out a 5. So 5 goes into 10 2 times. Negative 5 goes into positive 5 negative once. Again, if you look here, that's my common factor. So I have my 2x minus 1 along with my 4x minus 5, right? Okay, great. Okay, so let me go ahead and scroll down to the next one. We'll do it exactly the same way. So 7 times negative 11, negative 77. Okay. So if I'm thinking of what numbers multiply to 77 besides, 1 and 77, I can use 7 and 11. So 7 here, 11 over here. And again, I want you to notice this is a negative number. So one of those two numbers is going to have to be negative. If I look at that sign there, since that sign is negative, the bigger of my two numbers is going to be negative. That one's going to be positive. If I add those numbers together, there's my negative 4. So we're going to have 7x squared plus 7x minus 11x minus 11. So I'm going to go ahead and box those first two. Out of 7x squared plus 7x, I can factor out a 7x. And I'm left with an x plus 1. Out of a minus 11x and a minus 11, I can factor out a negative 11. And I'm left with an x plus 1. So now I have x plus 1 and 7x minus 11. Okay? So really what I want to point out is that this idea of grouping, it's been working with every single problem we've done since 13.1. Okay? So to me, if you can master this skill of factoring by grouping, you can do all the problems in chapter 13. Okay? All right. So first thing I notice about this problem is that I can at least factor out the number 2 out of all of them. So that's going to leave me with a 3x squared, a minus 1x, and a minus 10. Just like we did before, I'm going to write down my number 2 there. I don't want to forget about it. Okay. And so now, when I'm factoring 3x squared minus 1x minus 10, my first step is to multiply the first and the last number. That's going to leave me with a negative 30. Okay. So I'm going to look for two numbers that multiply to negative 30 and add up to a negative 1. I'll go ahead and use a positive 5 and a negative 6. Right? And so I'm going to go ahead and write out my problem. 3x squared plus 5x minus 6x minus 10. Okay. So out of there I can factor out, say, an x. I'm left with a 3x plus 5. Out of here I can factor out a minus 2. And I'm also left with a 3x and a plus 5. So here's my common factor. 3x plus 5, and the other factor is an x minus 2. Good deal. All right, so let's go ahead and come down to the next problem here. All right, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and underline that piece and underline that piece, and we'll multiply them together. So 15 times 2 is a 30. So I'm going to look for the numbers to multiply to 30 and add up to 11. Let's say 5 and 6. So we're going to have 15x squared plus 5x plus 6x plus 2. Okay. We'll go ahead and box these first two. I can factor a 5x out of here. Now I'm going to be left with a 3x plus 1. Out of here, I'm going to factor out the number 2. Be left with a 3x plus 1. Okay. And so now I have 3x plus 1 and a 5x plus 2. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and try this next one here. So, again, I'm going to go ahead and underline all three. First thing I notice is, hey, we can take out the letter x. Now I have a 2x squared and a 13x and a 15. And I'm going to go ahead and bring my x down over here. I don't want to forget it, my final answer. Okay. And so now we have 2x squared plus 13x plus 15. So 2 times 15 gives me a 30. And I want to find two numbers that multiply to 30, but they need to add up to 13. I think 3 and 10 are going to work. So now let's go ahead and write this out. 2x squared plus 3x plus 10x plus 15. So out of here, I can take out the letter x, left with a 2x plus 3. Out of here, I can factor out the number 5. I'm also left with 2x plus 3. So again, my common factor is 2x plus 3, and I'm also left with the x plus 5. So again, I'm hoping that this idea of factoring by grouping is making sense. And let's take a look at this next problem here. It's 6x squared minus 11x minus 10. This is the last problem here out of 13.4. So again, I'm going to multiply the first number and the last number. So 6 times negative 10, that's a negative 60. Okay. Now I need to find numbers that multiply to negative 60 and add up to a negative 11. Okay. So, I know 1 in 60, 2 in 30, but I'm trying to get closer to that. So let's say, 3 in 20. And again, that's going to be negative because the bigger numbers are going to be negative because of that. But if you notice, if I combine those together, that's a negative 17. Oh, let's see, 4 should go in there. I want to say 4 and 15. And again, if I make that one there negative and that one positive, there's my negative 11, right? So let's see what we can do here. So we're going to write, oops. Well, that's too much. Sorry about that, guys. Let me scroll back down to where we were. There we go. And let's clean up that a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to say we have 6x squared and a plus 4x and a minus 15x and a minus 10. And so from here, I don't know, we can take out a 2x. We're left with 3x plus 2. Out of here, I'll take out a negative 5. And I'm also going to be left with 3x plus 2. And there's my common factor, 3x plus 2 and 2x minus 5. Right? So I hope this section is making sense. Again, I'm doing the same thing every time. And if you all have questions, please let me know.